She walked into her father-in-law's lawyer's office, expecting grief. Paperwork, silence. Instead, she saw her husband holding a baby that wasn't hers. And beside him sat the woman who had quietly destroyed her marriage. No warning, no apology, just a practiced smile and a carefully hidden lie. What he didn't know was this. The man they had just buried had seen everything, and the will he left behind wasn't just about money. It was about truth, consequences, and power. Stay till the end and subscribe, because this story proves one thing. Betrayal doesn't always win. Sometimes it gets exposed. Alana froze in the doorway. For a moment, the room felt unreal. Polished wood table, leather chairs, framed certificates on the walls. This was supposed to be a quiet reading of her father-in-law's will. A moment of shared grief. Closure. Instead, 8 years of marriage collapsed in seconds. Her husband didn't rush to explain, didn't lower his voice, didn't even look ashamed. He stood there, calm and composed, a baby resting in his arms like a carefully planned prop. Then, with the same tone he once used to introduce Alana at company dinners, he spoke. "This is my son," he said casually, "and this is his mother." The woman beside him didn't look away. She adjusted her posture, lifted her chin, and smiled, not apologetically, but victoriously, as if she had won something long overdue. Alana felt the air leave her lungs. Every late night at work, every unexplained trip, every time he accused her of being distant, it all snapped into focus. Yet what shocked the room most wasn't the betrayal. It was Alana's silence. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't storm out like everyone expected. She simply walked forward and sat down. Her hands rested neatly in her lap, though her heart was racing. Across the table, lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. Family members shifted in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Her husband mistook her stillness for weakness. He straightened his shoulders, confident, almost smug, as if he believed this reveal had settled everything, as if the truth, once exposed, automatically belonged to him. But Alana felt something stirring beneath the shock, a quiet instinct, a warning, a certainty. This meeting wasn't over, because the man who had just been buried, the father her husband underestimated, had always seen more than he let on. And as Alana glanced at the sealed envelope resting before the lead attorney, she realized something powerful. This boardroom wasn't the end of her marriage. It was the beginning of a reckoning. When the lawyer cleared his throat and unfolded the will, the room shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but subtly, like a pressure change before a storm. Chairs straightened, hands tightened, eyes moved from Alana to her husband, then to the baby, then to the mistress. Everyone assumed they already knew how this would go. Bloodline, legacy, the son, the heir. That was how stories like this always ended. The lawyer began with formalities, dates, legal language, acknowledgments of assets. His voice was calm, practiced, almost boring. And yet, every word landed heavier than the last. "To my grandchildren," he read, "I leave items of sentimental value to be distributed at the executor's discretion." Alana barely reacted. She was still trying to keep her breathing steady, still holding herself together with quiet discipline. Across the table, her husband relaxed slightly. This was expected. Safe. Then the lawyer paused. And to Alana, the room stilled. Her husband's head snapped up. The mistress shifted, brows knitting together in confusion. Alana felt her spine straighten, though she hadn't moved a muscle. "To Alana, my daughter-in-law," the lawyer continued, "I leave my collection of rare first-edition books." A murmur rippled through the room. Those books weren't decorative. They were priceless, hand-selected over decades. Items the family had whispered about, fought over, envied. The lawyer didn't stop. "My mother's jewelry," he read next, "to be given to Alana, who treated her with kindness when others were too busy." The mistress's smile faltered. Alana's husband frowned, irritation flashing across his face. He leaned forward slightly, as if preparing to interrupt, but the lawyer raised a single finger. Firm, final. "And the lake house," he went on. the one Alana helped maintain, restore, and fill with warmth. It shall remain hers. Now the room wasn't murmuring. It was buzzing. The lake house was legacy property, weekend retreats, family traditions, a symbol of status. Alana felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. Not joy yet, but recognition. Memories flooded back. Cooking quietly in that kitchen while others argued. Repairing curtains. Listening to her father-in-law talk late into the night, when his son never called. She remembered how he'd watched her, not with praise, but with quiet observation. Still, she wasn't prepared for what came next. The lawyer took a breath, then another, and finally, he said, voice steady, a trust fund has been established in Alana's name. Silence. Not a cough. Not a chair creak. $5 million, the lawyer finished. The words didn't echo, they stunned. Her husband's face drained of color. The mistress's mouth opened, then closed again, disbelief etched into every feature. Someone whispered, "That can't be right." But it was. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and continued reading. Clauses, protections, conditions. The money was hers alone, not marital property, not transferable, shielded, permanent. Alana didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She simply closed her eyes for one brief second, because suddenly everything made sense. Her father-in-law's questions over the years, his insistence that she sit beside him at dinners, the way he'd once said quietly, "Strength doesn't always announce itself." He had seen the late nights she waited alone, the excuses she made for his son, the loyalty she gave without applause. He had seen her silence and understood it wasn't weakness. Across the table, her husband found his voice. "This must be a mistake," he said sharply. "My father wouldn't." The lawyer cut him off. "Your father amended this will 3 times in the last year," he said calmly. Each revision became more specific. He turned a page. He wrote this himself. The lawyer read the final note aloud. Alana stood by this family when it was easy to leave. She protected dignity when others chose desire. Loyalty like that deserves security, not abandonment. Alana's throat tightened. For the first time that day, she felt something crack, not break, but open. She had spent years feeling invisible, useful, replaceable. And yet, the one man everyone assumed was oblivious had seen everything. Her husband stared at her now, not with anger, not even betrayal, but with fear, because power had shifted. And he hadn't noticed until it was too late. The baby stirred softly in his arms. The mistress looked down, suddenly small, suddenly unsure of her place in this story. Alana met her husband's gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply realized the truth. She had walked into that room expecting loss. But she was walking out with something far more dangerous to a man like him. Proof. And for the first time that day, Alana knew she was not invisible. She was prepared. The lawyer paused, not because he had reached the end, but because what came next carried weight that numbers never could. "There's a personal letter," he said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. It was instructed that this be read aloud. Alana felt her breath catch. Her husband shifted uncomfortably. For the first time since she had entered the room, his confidence cracked. He glanced at the mistress, then back at the lawyer, as if silently calculating whether this was still salvageable. The lawyer broke the seal. "This letter," he said, "was written by the deceased in his final months." He began to read. "If you are hearing this, then I am no longer present to soften my words. So I will speak plainly." The room went still. "I have known about the affair for longer than you think." The mistress stiffened. The baby whimpered softly, sensing the tension. Alana's husband swallowed hard. "I did not discover it by accident. I confirmed it deliberately." The lawyer lifted his eyes briefly, then continued. "I hired a private investigator, not out of suspicion, but out of disappointment." A collective breath was released and held again. Photos were placed on the table. Hotel lobbies, airport terminals, late-night entrances through side doors. Every lie had been recorded, every timeline documented, every excuse dismantled. "I watched the pattern repeat," the letter continued. Not once, not impulsively, but with planning, with entitlement. Alana felt a strange calm wash over her. She had spent years doubting her instincts, telling herself she was imagining things, believing explanations that never quite fit. Now, the truth sat in black and white, unavoidable. What wounded me most, the letter read, was not the betrayal of marriage, but a betrayal of responsibility. Her husband's face hardened. A child was brought into the world under secrecy, and then presented as leverage. The mistress's lips parted, offended, but no words came. I watched you prepare to rewrite history, the letter continued, assuming silence would protect you. The lawyer turned another page. You mistook kindness for blindness. Alana felt tears burn, not of pain but validation. Her father-in-law had known, and he had chosen her. Alana never raised her voice, never embarrassed the family, never turned dignity into spectacle. The lawyer's voice softened. She carried herself with restraint, and that restraint told me everything I needed to know about her character. Then came the line that stole the air from the room. Character is not what we say. It is what we do when we think no one is watching. No one moved. The letter continued, unflinching. To my son, I leave you a choice, not a punishment. Her husband looked up sharply. You may continue the life you have chosen, but without the shelter of my legacy. The lawyer cleared his throat. The legal implications were precise. Assets would be frozen, shares reassigned, access revoked, or, the letter concluded, you may demonstrate accountability. A pause, public acknowledgement, responsibility toward the child, and the acceptance of consequences without coercion. The room felt heavy, charged. The will wasn't about money. It was about exposure, about drawing a line that could no longer be blurred. Alana finally understood why her father-in-law had been so methodical, why he hadn't confronted his son in life. This wasn't revenge. It was structure. He had built a framework where truth would stand on its own, long after he was gone. Her husband stared down at the table. The man who had entered the room believing he still controlled the narrative now looked trapped inside it. He had a choice: change, or lose everything that had protected him from consequence. Alana watched him quietly, not with anger, not with triumph, but with clarity, because for the first time, the truth wasn't hers to carry alone. It had risen from beyond the grave, and it demanded an answer. The lawyer didn't rush through the conditions. He read them slowly, deliberately, as if giving each one time to breathe, to settle, to be understood. This wasn't fine print meant to be overlooked. It was a moral inventory. The inheritance, he said, is conditional. Alana's husband lifted his head, jaw tightening. The mistress leaned forward, hope flickering in her eyes. The lawyer continued. First, a public apology. A visible flinch. Not a statement written by a publicist. The lawyer clarified. A personal acknowledgement of betrayal. To your wife, to your family, and to the board. Alana felt her chest rise and fall. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about ownership. Second, immediate marriage counseling. The lawyer read, at your own expense. Attendance mandatory. Transparency required. Her husband scoffed quietly, then stopped himself when every eye turned toward him. Third, permanent termination of all personal and professional ties with the mistress. The room froze. The woman beside him stiffened. Her hand instinctively tightened around the baby's blanket. No contact. The lawyer continued evenly. No financial arrangements beyond legally mandated child support. No shared assets. No private communication. The mistress's face drained of color. Fourth, share control of the company. That one landed hard. The empire her husband had inherited, expanded, boasted about, no longer is alone. Alana will hold equal decision-making authority, the lawyer said. All major actions require mutual consent. Alana's husband laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You can't be serious, he muttered. The lawyer didn't react. Fifth, ongoing community service. A pause. Not ceremonial, not photographed. 3 years. Weekly. Her husband shifted in his seat, irritation bubbling into open resentment. And finally, the lawyer said, lifelong financial protection for Alana, independent of marital status. Silence followed. This wasn't a leash. It was a mirror. 30 days. That was the timeline. 30 days to demonstrate humility. 30 days to choose accountability over ego. 30 days to prove that the man who betrayed could become the man who repaired. Alana didn't speak. She didn't need to. The conditions spoke for her. Over the next weeks, the transformation was surface level. A carefully staged apology video. Heavy on excuses, light on responsibility. Counseling sessions he attended physically, but not emotionally. Phone calls deleted, not ended. Promises phrased as obligations. Pride doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smirks. The mistress lingered in the background, never acknowledged publicly, but never truly dismissed. A shadow he refused to fully release. At night, Alana watched him closely, not with hope, with observation. She saw how his frustration grew, how he resented the scrutiny, how he framed every condition as an insult instead of an opportunity. To him, this was a redemption. It was punishment. On the 29th day, the board convened. Final review. One decision left. The room was tense. Lawyers present. Trustees waiting. Witnesses prepared. Alana sat across from him, calm, composed, unreadable. The lead trustee spoke. Do you accept the final condition? He asked. The last condition hadn't been read aloud yet. It was simple. A live, unscripted apology in the same boardroom where he had introduced his secret child. No notes, no spin, no justification. Just truth. Her husband stared at the table. Then he looked up and laughed. I won't grovel, he said. I won't beg for what's already mine. The words echoed, ugly final. Alana felt something settle inside her. Not pain, relief, because in that moment there was no more doubt. The trustee nodded once. Then the conditions have not been met. The verdict was immediate. Control of the company transferred. Voting rights revoked. Trust assets frozen permanently. The mistress gasped. Her husband stood up abruptly, anger spilling over. You can't do this, he shouted. This is extortion. The lawyer didn't even look up. It's consequence, he said. Security stepped forward. The empire that had once bowed to him now escorted him out. Alana remained seated, not victorious, grounded. She watched the door close behind the man who had chosen pride over love, ego over accountability. Just like that, everything he thought was untouchable slipped through his fingers. And for the first time since the betrayal began, Alana didn't feel small. She felt free. 6 months later, Alana stood at the head of the same company where her silence had once been mistaken for weakness. The boardroom hadn't changed. Same polished table. Same skyline beyond the glass. But the atmosphere was unrecognizable. There was no tension, no posturing, only focus, purpose, and respect. She didn't raise her voice to command it. She earned it, decision by decision. The first changes weren't dramatic. They were deliberate. She funded scholarships in her father-in-law's name, not for publicity, but for students who had no connections, no safety net. She supported local businesses that had been ignored by corporate giants. She insisted on ethical audits, transparent hiring, and accountability that didn't disappear behind closed doors. Profits didn't fall. They grew, because integrity, when practiced consistently, builds trust, and trust builds loyalty. Employees stayed late not out of fear, but belief. The community noticed. So did the industry. People began to talk, not about scandal, not about betrayal, but about leadership, about a woman who had inherited chaos and turned it into clarity. Alana never erased the past. She learned from it. She finalized her divorce quietly, without spectacle. She ensured the child was protected financially, not out of obligation, but conscience. She didn't punish. She corrected. Her ex-husband faded from relevance. Lawsuits failed. Doors closed. The man who once believed he owned everything discovered what happens when power is built on ego instead of character. Alana didn't watch him fall. She was too busy building. At home, her life softened. Mornings were peaceful, evenings unhurried. Laughter returned, slowly, honestly. She rediscovered parts of herself that had been buried beneath compromise and endurance. She wasn't angry. She wasn't seeking validation. She was free. One afternoon, she visited the lake house. The water was still, the air quiet. She sat on the porch with a book from the rare collection and finally allowed herself to smile. Not because she had won, but because she had survived and then chosen better. The world hadn't changed overnight, but she had. And that changed everything. Not bitter, not broken, just powerful, in a quiet, unshakable way. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about truth waiting for the right moment, about a woman who stayed silent, not because she was weak, but because she was watching. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. It waits, it plans, and it strikes with quiet dignity, leaving no doubt. Alana didn't need to prove herself with anger. She didn't need to reclaim her life with noise. Her strength was measured in patience, resilience, and the choices she made when no one else was looking. If this story inspired you, like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales where courage whispers and justice, patient, deliberate, unstoppable, changes everything.